Ray tracing on AMD graphics cards? Offering more value than the green team. But is AMD late to the party though? I hope you guys are ready because today we're gonna be doing a comparison review on these Radeon RX 6000 series GPUs, namely the RX 6800, RX 6800 XT, and the RX 6900 XT. 69. I see what you did there, AMD. AMD said that while these GPUs are priced lower than the competition, they would deliver the same or more performance than the competition. But can we trust them though? Is this the year that AMD finally delivers us GPUs that are as good as their Ryzen processors? Did Lisa Su finally deliver? Let's find out. So I know we're a little bit late to the party, but when these bad boys first launched, they really piqued my interest because of the bold claims that AMD was making about their performance as well as new feature set. This is especially because I'm working and gaming on PCs that are powered by the flagship of the green team, namely the RTX 3090 and the RTX 3080. While AMD started to offer more compelling options when it comes to their graphics cards in the past couple of years, the RX 5700 XT being my favorite of the bunch, other than offering us raw performance that is very good, especially in rasterization at a lower cost, they lack some of the more cutting-edge features that the competition is bringing to the table. Also, being a content creator that uses Premiere Pro as our main NLE or non-linear editing software, I've always been more drawn to the green team because of the better optimization and utilization of CUDA versus OpenCL. However, ever since we started using more Davinci Resolve that is getting better as an NLE and not just good for color grading on our PCs and Mac, they do really well on Radeon graphics cards, so I've been waiting for AMD to get back into the game and entice me with some better options. So today we want to see if the RX 6900 XT, 6800 XT and 6800 are actually competitive against the green team when it comes to gaming and working. So we're not just gonna do benchmarks in gaming but also productivity tasks such as Premiere Pro and After Effects and Davinci Resolve. If you like to work hard and play harder, stay tuned. Firstly, let's take a look at the aesthetics. Now, these RX 6000 series reference graphics cards have a very nice streamlined sports car aesthetics. The GPU shroud is made in matte black die-cast aluminum with silver accents and a sandblasted finish. They even beveled out the cutouts for the fans, which shines and draws attention to the silver fans and the updated, much more aggressive Radeon logo. On the sides, the shroud wrapped around to frame the giant black aluminum heatsink with a red line on one side and a Radeon logo that is glowing indecisively red. The back plate, which looks like it was milled from the same solid piece of aluminum, also has the same sandblasted silver finish with a cutout to showcase a huge array of MLCC capacitors. Wait, is this just AMD throwing shade? Also, I can't be the only one to notice that the R looks oddly similar to another initial from a dynamic duo that's always up to no good. Let us see if these graphics cards can actually stir the pot. Looking at dimensions, the RX 6800 is 267mm long, 120mm wide, and 39mm deep, and it is a 2 expansion slot graphics card. On the other hand, the RX 6800 XT and 6900 XT are both 267mm long, 120mm wide, and 50mm deep. When it comes to thermal design, each of these graphics cards come with triple 9-bladed axial fans that has this giant R printed on top, rated for really likes to rotate just like this table. It will rotate forever for as long as your graphics card is alive. They all come with a huge vapor chamber cooler and probably a copper block that dissipates heat evenly across the full aluminum heatsink. As the fans blow cool air onto the heatsink, the moving air removes heat from the heatsink via the 2 windows on the sides. AMD also uses a graphite thermal interface material on the GPU for optimum heat transfer. And finally, we have the 0 RPM fan mode that turns the fans off on lighter workloads to keep the noise down, although I don't think that the fans are that noisy anyways. Taking a deeper dive into the specifications, these new cards are built on AMD's latest RDNA 2 architecture and should deliver much higher performance and power efficiency even if still using the similar 7nm process as the previous generation. Also, we're getting smaller and more than double the amount of transistors in the new chips, which again should help with power efficiency. Moving on, the RX 6000 series cards all have 128MB of Infinity Cache and 16GB of GDDR6 memory, and that's where all the similarities end, with the exception of the RX 6800 XT and 6900 XT's base and boost clock. As we move up the list with the RX 6800, RX 6800 XT to finally the RX 6900 XT, you're gonna get more compute units, stream processors, and correspondingly a higher TDP. The RX 6800 XT and 6900 XT share a lot of similarities as well, but the fully enabled Navi 21 chip in the latter is capable of a higher performance, and when compared to the previous generation's RX 5700 XT, even the lowest end RX 6800 has 33.3% more stream processors and twice the amount of GDDR6 VRAM. All this should translate to huge performance gains over the previous gen in terms of rasterization and GPU accelerated productivity tasks. 4K gaming should also perform much better on these newer cards because of the VRAM increase, which doubled up to 16GB of GDDR6 over the last gen's 5700 XT. So now let's take a closer look at the special features that come with these RX 6000 series graphics cards. Rage Mode is AMD's latest tuning preset that pushes their graphics cards to higher than normal voltages with more aggressive fan profiles to achieve higher clock speeds for a boost in performance. The trade-off is of course more fan noise and a higher power consumption. But as I like to say, us PC Master Race can afford to pay our electricity bills. Infinity Cache minimizes DRAM bottlenecks, latency, and power consumption by introducing a high-speed 128MB cache based on the Zen 3 L3 cache. It improves power efficiency and doubles memory bandwidth of the 256-bit GDDR6 to compete against GDDR6X that is faster and has a wider memory bus. So finally, we have Smart Access Memory that allows compatible 5000 series Ryzen processors to access all the GPU's VRAM simultaneously as opposed to just 256MB at any given time, which is a limit that was carried over from the 32-bit era. We speculate that this is AMD's solution to make their GPUs that come with GDDR6 more competitive versus the green teams that come with GDDR6X. We couldn't test SAM because we didn't manage to get a 5000 series CPU on time for this review. However, based on other reliable sources, it seems that this would yield a single digit up to a low dual digit performance difference compared to having SAM off. With that in mind, these are our test bench specs. Moving on to the numbers. Firstly, we have synthetic benchmarks and gonna kick things off with 3D Mark. We're looking at huge improvements over the last gen RX 5700 XT, with the 6900 XT beating it by 47% in time spy normal and 51% in time spy extreme. Even the RX 6800 managed to beat it by quite a huge margin. Now the RX 6800 XT runs neck and neck with the 3090, and the 6900 XT beats the 3090 by 9% in time spy and 5% in time spy extreme. The RX 6800 on the other hand falls slightly short behind the 3080. Next, we have Unigine superposition, and the numbers seem to favor the green team, but we are however still seeing a huge improvement over the previous generation RX 5700 XT, with the 6900 XT beating it by 43 to 51% across the board. After that, we have the gaming benchmarks, and we're gonna kick things off with COD Black Ops Cold War. This is the game that proves that the RX 6000 series can game on ray tracing, at least on 1080p and 1440p. 4K, however, is still going to be a very cinematic 34 to 41 frames per second. Now, Rage Mode could be the saving grace here, which we will definitely be keen to test out the first chance we get, so please stay tuned. Also, we're still not seeing Fidelity FX Super Resolution yet, and it could make or break 4K ray trace gaming for AMD. If you want to play this game on AMD cards right now, do stick to 1080p or 1440p for ray tracing, or turn it off and enjoy the raw power for more FPS. In Shadow of Tomb Raider with RT off in 1080p, the 6800 XT managed to beat the 3080 by 8%, with the 6800 close behind. Now the 6900 XT still loses to the 3090, although it managed to break 200 FPS. With RT on, even without DLSS, Nvidia still takes the lead here, but as you can see, RT is completely playable right here. The same story continues with 1440p. With both ray tracing off and on, we're still seeing the same performance patterns as 1080p, but the RX 6800 even manages to hit 68 frames with RT on, which is completely playable with this game. In 4K, however, while it is definitely playable with RT off on all three RX 6000 series GPUs, the competition pulls quite a bit ahead with RT on and off. Next, we have Death Stranding, and this is where the RX 6000 series shine. It started off as a PS4 game which uses AMD hardware, so there's no surprise here. In 1080p, the 6900 XT beats the 3090 by 7%, the 6800 XT beats the 3080 by 6%, even the 6800 takes a 5% lead over the 3080. And what's more surprising is that this lead increases to a 15 to 17% in 1440p across the board. In 4K, however, things are neck and neck between the two teams. In Cyberpunk 2077, the RX 6000 series has no ray tracing yet, so we'll only be able to test it with the Ultra preset. All three cards go neck and neck with the RTX 3080 and 3090 in 1080p, 1440p, and 4K. And things might change if we do factor in ray tracing in the future as well as DLSS from the competition, but based on raw performance, the 6000 series cards are no slouches here. Finally, we have real-world benchmarks, and we're gonna kick things off with Premiere Pro, where the green team takes the cake here. Even the last gen 2080 Super pulls ahead by almost 10%. In After Effects, the RX 6900 XT is 16% faster than the 3090, and surprisingly, even the 6800 XT is faster by 13% than the 3090. The RX 6800 isn't as fast, but still manages to be 36% faster than the RTX 3080. In our Blender test with the classroom scene, the OpenCL from AMD's 6000 series loses ever so slightly by 10% to CUDA from the RTX 30 series, which is still pretty commendable right here. Davinci Resolve shows us that things are very close right here, so it really doesn't matter which card you're using as long as it's current gen, no matter if it's from the red or green team. Finally, in our Firmware stress test, these cards show that their fancy vapor chamber coolers can definitely take the heat and cool things down. Okay, so what do we think about these RX 6000 series GPUs? Firstly, I love the design on these bad boys. There's no RGB, but they are designed very well. They look like sports cars, to be honest, and they are built like a tank. If you hit your head with one of these, you're probably gonna be hospitalized. Number 3, we have good rasterization performance across the board, and surprisingly decent ray tracing performance considering that this is the first time that AMD has implemented ray tracing into their GPUs. Next, we have comparable Davinci Resolve performance, which is a very good point that I will talk about a little bit more later when I look at the individual cards. Next, we have PCIe 4.0 support, which might not mean much because we are barely saturating our PCIe 3.0 as it is with our GPUs. But then we have HDMI 2.1, which allows you to game on any of these GPUs at a 4K or 120Hz display or an 8K 60Hz display. We did all our benchmarks in Ultra, which might discourage you to use any of these GPUs to game in 4K or 8K. But if you lower the settings, you could potentially game on a 4K 120Hz display or an 8K display, which will undoubtedly get much cheaper in the next couple of years as they get more common. Next, we have great price to performance ratio, which is a lot more evident in the RX 6800 XT than the other two cards, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later as well. And they are all across the board extremely quiet even when the fans are running on full, except when we got a little bit of coil whine coming out of our RX 6900 XT. I went online and checked on other sources, and it seems to be quite an uncommon issue with these cards, so it could be our sample. Take it with a grain of salt. Finally, we have the excellent thermal design, which I don't doubt is due to the next point, which is the 7nm process, which leads to a lower TDP and lower power draw as well. Moving on to the meh. And in this case, there's a very evident one, is that OpenCL is still not that widely utilized compared to CUDA by developers, especially in productivity tasks like Premiere Pro. And this would only matter if you use those applications, and the issue here is not with the tech itself, with OpenCL being inferior. It's just that AMD needs to work more closely with developers to get their tech utilized better. Finally, let's take a look at the cons, and the main one here is that ray tracing is going to take a bigger performance hit on these AMD GPUs compared to the green team, mainly because it's a lot more mature over there and they have DLSS, which does a lot to actually reduce the performance hit on ray tracing. Hopefully, as more games support ray tracing on AMD GPUs, no doubt because the next gen consoles are all using AMD tech, we're gonna see more improvements in ray tracing performance on AMD GPUs. So those are my overall thoughts on the entire lineup, but what is the final verdict on these individual GPUs? I think that AMD is definitely very strategic with their pricing and manages to give us a better, if not equivalent, price to performance ratio compared to the green team, especially in rasterization. But they definitely need to work a lot closer with game developers to offer a wider support for their ray tracing, as well as better utilization of their OpenCL in productivity applications. Firstly, let's take a look at the RX 6900 XT, which is launched at $999 US. It is only 10% faster than the 6800 XT in most of our tests, and also like the 3090, this is a very niche card that is catered towards a flagship enthusiast such as myself, which to be honest takes up a very small minority in the gaming community, and also for professionals, because if you're a true professional, you'll probably go for a professional grade GPU offering from either camps. While it is indeed much cheaper than the RTX 3090, which was launched at $1,499 US, I can't help but to be disappointed that it still does not beat the green team as a flagship GPU from AMD, and only being slightly faster than the 6800 XT. So in this case, I give the RX 6900 XT a very solid 7.5 out of 10, solely because of its good price to performance ratio as a flagship GPU from AMD. Next, we have the RX 6800 XT, which is my favorite of the bunch, and it was launched at $649 US, $50 cheaper than the 3080. This is the best offering from AMD in this lineup because it strikes the best balance between price to performance ratio out of the three GPUs. It has 16GB of VRAM as compared to 10GB from the 3080. You can definitely game in 4K with this card in most titles if you turn off ray tracing, except for Cyberpunk, which is the crisis of 2020 because I can barely even run it with my 3080 with DLSS on to hit 4K 60 frames. It definitely needs a lot more optimization, which hopefully could happen in the next couple of months. If you want ray tracing though, Nvidia definitely offers the more mature product, but I think that people who game with ray tracing is still the minority, because I think the most of you guys would definitely prefer more frames than to sacrifice FPS turning ray tracing on. And finally, if you're a content creator that uses Davinci Resolve, there's no reason why you shouldn't pick this card up because it is definitely cheaper than 3080 and performs very close to that. I give this a very solid cheap buy until your mother cannot recognize 9 out of 10. Finally, we have the RX 6800, which is the baby of the bunch, and it was launched at $579 US, which is interesting because it is more expensive than the 3090, which was launched at $499 US. Specs wise, it is still quite impressive with 16GB of VRAM. It is the cheapest GPU in the lineup, which means that it's gonna come with all the good stuff like the 7nm process and a lower TDP. From our test, it is faster than the 3060 Ti and by speculation, ever slightly faster than 3070, except maybe if you turn on ray tracing and DLSS. But the 3070 seems to still have the better price to performance ratio, again if our 3060 Ti is any indication. Because according to most reliable sources, the 3060 Ti gets quite close to the 3070 in most scenarios. Again, we can't validate this until we get a 3070 into our lab, so please take this with a grain of salt. Regardless, it is still quite a bit cheaper than the RX 6800 XT, which would be my recommendation for most people, and because of its awesome yet awkward position, I give this card a very solid 8 out of 10. Who knows, when they do release an RX 6800 with less VRAM at a lower cost, this could be truly something special. In conclusion, AMD is definitely back in the game, and while they do not have a flagship that can dethrone the RTX 3090, they've definitely ventured a lot further out of their comfort zone with the RX 6900 XT that was launched much higher than their previous flagship in the past couple of years at $999 US, namely compared to the RX 5700 XT that was priced at $400 US, as well as Radeon 7 at $700 US. I can't help but be hopeful that this could be the turning point for AMD GPUs, as observed with their first-gen Ryzen processors, and AMD is slowly but surely strengthening their efforts to regain consumer confidence as well as market share. And I personally will be picking up a couple of these babies, especially the RX 6800 XT, because I want to support a little bit more competition in the market and keep the green team on their toes. If you thought this video is awesome, don't forget to like and share and leave a comment below to let us know what do you think about ray tracing on AMD GPUs and what do you think about the difference in terms of performance between these cards and the green team's offerings. And also, would you pick these cards up? Let me know. Leave a comment down below because I'm going to try to reply to every one of you because I'm nice like that. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the notification bell to see more content like this, and follow us on Facebook and Instagram to see more shenanigans from the Mob House crew. And I will see you in the next one.